And we're rolling in. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Please let me know. It's good to see those of you who have shown up. We're going to talk a little bit about these threats made by Russia today. I don't know, stick around for maybe about an hour, see what kind of questions, comments you all have. I want to hear your thoughts as well. What do you think tonight as I sit in Virginia, right outside of Mordor on the Potomac? You can see over my shoulder through the magic window. Popcorn Power says, sound is perfect. Thank you, brother. I appreciate the feedback. There's Dan. There's the sweet little Katie. And Stephen is with us. Fit and healthy at any age. And Franklin. And Kingdom of Finland. Great to see you all. Trip and Sip. Welcome. Dr. Dinger. Victorian Time Traveler. 0022. Joel. Great to see you all. Joel was here first. Remember to tag me. It says that no white guilt is such a powerful statement, I guess, by Fit and Healthy at Any Age. It really is. Because that is, they need you to feel that to get everything that they want to do to you. If you don't have white guilt, then you won't lower your defenses. You will stand together with your brothers and sisters for the well-being of our people, white well-being, and you will prevent the anti-whites from accomplishing anything they would like to accomplish against us. Archangel is with us. Great to see you. Stephen is as well. Welcome. We'll get right into this. Just to let you all know, Cash App is up. Entropy is up. Odyssey is running. D-Live, great to see you all in all these locations. Well, let's make sure that D-Live is working. I did a back routine today at the gym. I am feeling it. Anybody else go to the gym today? It was beautiful in Virginia. Caleb says went to the gym. Azimuth Clark is here. Great to see you. Jason C says, hey, Jason, you have a cool name. So do you, my friend. Small world. All right. Let's not waste any time. We'll get to these stories. Finland leaders, this is on USA Today. Fit and Healthy says chest back buys and some calves. That was a big day at the gym. Yeah. Chest and back. Wow. Good workout. Yeah, I did primary back and then moved over, did the secondary biceps. I also did squat today because the back is worked with squat as well. Caleb asks, Jason, what's more effective, speaking at city councils or calling local and state reps directly? Really depends on the issue for which you're calling. Generally speaking, when you can get in front of these elected or people who are running for office, we can get in front of them with a crowd present and put them on the spot and say, are you okay with white people being victimized? Do you want to put an end to the victimization of Western kind? You talk about every other race. Can you even say the white race? Can you say that you don't want white children to be taught to hate themselves? Just say that for the crowd. And if you can't, then should white people be voting for you? If you can't even say our name, can't even say that you don't want white children to be taught, I mean, just leave out no other race is being taught to hate themselves. So Mr. or Mrs. whatever, congressperson, whatever, do you object? And can you say you object to white children being taught to hate themselves in schools? And if they won't say it, you want to make sure their voters know, because that is in politics the most powerful thing that we can do with the numbers that we have, the resources that we have, is because remember, it doesn't matter how many people we get into office, that it's reasonable. I mean, how many folks are you actually going, say you've got 50 in the House and 10 or so in the Senate? You know that's impossible, but let's say you did it. What would you do? They would shut you down. There are mechanisms in place at the federal level, and I assume at state level as well, where they can absolutely divest you of all of your power. And you say, well, that can't be because I voted for them, and that means the population wants them to be there. Well, they can be there, but they can also be powerless. And that's ultimately what they end up doing. So what we can do, though, is we can, with the numbers that we have, the resources that we have, get to the white people who vote for Republican politicians, and we can make sure that they know if the politician is not willing to openly say, I oppose white children being taught to hate themselves, and any number of other iterations of these things. If we can get to them, and in a public way, obviously, then a significant portion of those people will not vote for that politician, even though they want a Republican in office. They'll think, boy, this is really nuts that this guy or this woman can't even say X, Y, or Z. The politician will know that losing whatever percentage it might be 3%, it might be 8%, who knows, of white people who would vote for them, who, upon hearing that the politician just absolutely refuses to stand up for white people, upon hearing that, won't go to vote. These politicians will know, or wannabes, they will know that they will lose the election. And so that will force the key concepts that we use into the mouths of politicians and therefore into the population. And the more we get them to say something like, I object to anti-whiteism, you get them to say that, then those voters, all the white voters, will begin using it in a heartbeat. Well, he or she said at whatever rally that he objects to anti-whiteism. That spreads. We need to, it's remarkable. It hurts my heart that we have strategies that when articulated, you can see, oh my gosh, what Jason is saying will actually work. People will start changing their mind. You could really get a head of momentum going that way. It hurts my heart that only the finest, only the best, only the smartest, only the most courageous make it over here, because it leaves us with such a few champions to do the job that needs to be done. Now, to answer the rest of your question, what about calling? Well, we would want to try to organize campaigns. So that doesn't mean that you can't do it or shouldn't do it on your own. If you have the wherewithal, you have the time, you have the patience, you want to pick up the phone, let them know. Because those staffers that take those messages will relate those messages to the senator or congressperson. So if we have, I mean, think about it, there's a particular issue. If you're doing it and then we get calling a particular office, and then we get 20 people to call the office, we could 30 people, 50 people who call the office, all saying similar things, using the maybe one or two or three of the key concepts. Those staffers are going to think, oh my God, there's this groundswell. And there is, because we're making it happen, and they will tell the politician. So yes, we might have to start doing a political show here. What do you all think about that? A political show. So I did some buys, and I did back. I was tearing it up. And squat, of course. But I'm having one of those fit and healthy, you know what I'm talking about here. You have those like periods where suddenly your body is stronger. You're actually demonstrating greater strength when you get under the weight. You pick it up and you're like, wow. And it's not just one of those like one day off. I'm having one of those things. I'm in one of those phases. So I'm in my notebook at the gym and I'm like, wow, raising the weights on everything. It's amazing. I must actually be just hitting my prime. That's what it is. Watch out, world. Caesar's with us. Have you all saw the news today? There are a lot of people who are freaking out over this. And there are some things to be concerned about. Absolutely. Nancy Drew is here. Wonderful to see. Those Lapis. Davey is here. Great to see you all. Love is everything. Well, that is a great name. Says, I gave a speech at a school board meeting one time in 2019, and it was adequate voice for the board to dismiss the LGBT activists attacking the schools. Well, that is magnificent. Well done. Thank you for standing up. Now, what you need to do is you need to get empowered with key concepts that we use here, and that will take your oration, that will take your arguments to the next level, of place you couldn't even imagine how powerful you will be. You will win every conversation. You won't have to be snarky and walk away pretending everything is a joke. You will actually be able to be the moral victor of the conversation. How would you like that? Hey, the modern monarchist is here. Great to see you, good brother. That's fantastic. Folks, make sure you follow the modern monarchist here on YouTube. You just type that in, the modern monarchist. He'll come up, and he's a great young man, young champion of Western kind. Very proud of him. We expect and anticipate to see great things. Very bright. I think he's easily one of the brightest of all of America first, which is of a lot of the young men that have shown up there. There are a lot of bright guys. So he's right up there at the top. Love is Everything adds that Alex Jones never tells you to call your congressman about anything because he knows if he actually mobilized people to action, he would be put out of business. Well, he was kind of, right? They did shut him down. Glenn is here. Morning to you, my friend. Morning. Where are you in the world again? If you don't want to tell your specific country, you can give us a fake country. Finland leaders, USA Today writes, Finland leaders back NATO bid. Russia vows retaliatory military measures. Zelensky says Ukraine won't save Putin's face. What did I tell you all? See, this is why. Should I do a political show? I mean, I'm right again and again about the politics. There are a lot of people, they want to talk about politics, and we can help them. Certainly. John, Kim, George, and Selena all writing here. John's actually got the best name, Bacon. Best last name, Bacon. Finland's leadership announced support Thursday for expedited NATO membership, despite dire Kremlin warnings of, quote, retaliatory steps. The decision by President Sauli Niinistö and Prime Minister Sanna Marin is strongly supported by lawmakers and citizens of Finland. Now, if you don't know, let me pull this up. Maybe we can see. Exactly. Can we do this? If you're not aware, there's a gigantic border with Russia. And where is it? There we go. Can you all see that? And can you still hear me? All right. So what are we looking at here? Can you see? I'm moving the map there. It appears that you can. So here's where we have all of the issues down here, of course. You have Ukraine, and then here is the river that I thought Russia would take everything to the east of. Dnieper, something like that. And then, of course, everything bordering down here toward Odessa. Can you see the, you probably can't. Can you see the cursor? And then all the way up here into, this is Moldova. And there are some states that actually, I think, are on both sides of this line that they show here. So then you would have this sort of a curving thing through the states over here that they would then declare independent entities and then keep everything to the east of this river. This, of course, would create this buffer zone on the east side of Ukraine, which is obviously very important to Russia. So let me back up a little bit so you can see. There's Moscow. There's the capital. Down here, you also have a slew of wonderful places to live where oligarchs like to have mansions. Very close to Ukraine. You also, if you move up here, you see St. Petersburg, very important to to Russia and the power of that country, and of course, the Russian oligarchs. Now, Finland is here, and look at this. Look at the size of this border that Finland shares. It is colossal. Now, this territory, I would like to, if I did a political show, maybe like once a week, I would bring in somebody who is an expert on this terrain, or at least try to, and find out exactly. But it looks like it's pretty inhospitable. Nonetheless, this is far too close to St. Petersburg for Russian oligarchs, which again, they use, all oligarchs use the countries they dominate in the way that I have shared the analogy that it's like a wild animal. It's like a lion, if you will. And you can control it to a degree. But since it's not domesticated, it's never in as much control as a domesticated animal and can turn on you, just as these big cats, they reared from cubs all the way up with a human that had bottle fed them and all the way up, and then they end up eating them one day. I mean, it happens, right? But there used to be in Arlington, Virginia, which is right here beside Washington, D.C. as well, there used to be they used to permit big cats as pets. And so there was a guy who had a black panther, just like couldn't see any markings on it, and like just pure jet. And but then that they passed ordinance that said no more gigantic wild pets. But I guess if you had one already, you were probably fine. Don't know what happened to him or the cat. Maybe he was eaten. Ultimately, there you have the warning. So this, as you can see, is totally intolerable. What are the American oligarchs? And really, that's we can just, for convenience, but also because it's pretty well damn accurate, say that this is a conflict between American oligarchs and Russian oligarchs, because the oligarchs who are in, and I'm not saying American as in citizenship or American as in Westman. I'm not saying any of that. Not saying that they're not either, though, but not saying any of that. The other oligarchs that you find who are in Europe, generally speaking, are pretty much vassals of the ones who dominate the United States. So it's safe to say that this is, as is always the case with human beings, a conflict between those who are the most powerful, and they use populations as tools against each other. Does that make sense? So now that does not mean that a particular vendetta or particular disagreement or particular claim of any peoples in any of these regions is illegitimate or doesn't play a part in a conflict. Absolutely not. The human animal is multidimensional, to say the least. And so a lot of different things. You can have somebody come into this and say, well, this is just all about the town of Y that has been near the border between these two states and has been fought over forever. And so that is why this is the absolute cause of the conflict. And it's used as the casus belli. You'll have people that will actually believe that. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't play a role, just that it's not playing the we'll go back to the big cats, the lion's share of the role. So this is very important to Russia if they wanted to have, and saying that it's important to Russia doesn't mean that I'm siding with Russia. I'm telling you what's obvious. I'm not siding with any side. My position is I want the war to end as quickly as possible. And some people are going to be unhappy. Some people are going to be happy or nearly happy or whatever about the way it ends up. But bottom line is that we want it to end. I want it to end right away to put an end to the death on both sides. So you have this Dnieper River. And I've been saying now for weeks that I could foresee Russia saying, okay, we have everything to the east there and everything to the south bordering the Black Sea. And so we're done. We're ready to bring an end to the war and begin the talks. And that then the American oligarchs, by way of their vassals, et cetera, would want to continue the war against the Russian oligarchs. And so you would just end up having like this rolling boil over there, it would be a festering wound, which is something that we really don't want for the well-being of Western kind. When we don't want it for the United States, we don't want it for the peoples on either side of this conflict. But this is a bad scenario where you have billions and billions of dollars being pumped in to Ukraine, which is really the laundering mat of the world for drugs, for sex slaves, for just cash. And so much of the cash that's heading into Ukraine is just being pilfered. So that's your and my tax dollars. We have our prices in the United States are soaring. Fuel prices, meat prices, everything that you can imagine soaring. Inflation soaring. Now, I raised this possibility as well, that maybe they're sending, maybe some of the reason for sending billions of actual currency to Ukraine is to burn it in order to help bring down inflation. It's not impossible. But the oligarchs that run America or dominate America would not like to have their situation of just total control and getting the population to pretty much do whatever they want. They would not like to have that shaken by people starving and getting angry because it's harder to get things like baby formula and everything. We're in the news these days. Finland's leadership announced support Thursday for expedited NATO membership, despite dire Kremlin warnings of retaliatory steps. NATO, quote, NATO membership would strengthen Finland's security, close quote, the leaders said in a joint statement. Quote, as a member of NATO, Finland would strengthen the entire defense alliance. Finland must apply for NATO membership without delay. So I guess I'll take a look at the map. I'll drop that and see what you all are saying as I just quickly work through a couple of these headlines with you. Got to get used to the new style of doing this. But what it seems to me is that America wants to pressure Russia. American oligarchs want to pressure the Russian oligarchs by threatening to bring Finland and Sweden in. That will undermine this whole endeavor of the Russian oligarchs to have a buffer between Russia and their homes and the desires of the American oligarchs. I mean, if you go from the border with Ukraine, even if you secure that, but you lose security on the border with Finland, that's completely undermined the whole purpose, or one of the primary purposes. There aren't any singular purposes for those who are in charge. Dummies can think of singular purposes and they just stick with it like a rabid dog. But there are many purposes. One of the purposes, of course, is that Eastern Ukraine has a lot of wonderful natural resources, as well as farming land. Western Ukraine, more just farming land, to my understanding. They said they hoped the application would be submitted in the next few days. Finland's Minister for European Affairs. Oh, this is kind of an unfortunate first name. Oh, look at that surname. Tupurainen. Tupurainen is the surname. Titi is the first name. Titi Tupurainen said Finland's parliament will vote on the matter early next week. Early next week. Finland shares, and there you have it, 830-mile border with Russia. But we want to defend our freedom and our equality. Listen to that garbage. Now, when they say, what is Finland talking about? You want to defend your freedom. Russia's not threatening your freedom. We're beginning to see, just like we saw with this bill we were saying it could very rightly or accurately be called by some as an infanticide bill, which was just failed to pass in the Senate and now is being reformulated in order for it to pass. So stay tuned for that. And we saw that in that bill, they said the only people that would oppose that are white supremacists. So here we have the anti-white meme pathogen equality being used in Finland as what they want to defend from Russian aggression. We want to defend our freedom and our equality. You're not threatened by Russia. There is no evidence that I have seen that is legitimate that Russia has any intention on invading Finland. This is an aggressive stance by the American oligarchs by way of the proxy of Finland. We want to defend our freedom and our anti-whiteism. That's what they're saying. We want to defend our freedom and our anti-whiteism. Rest assured, though, that the Russian oligarchs don't care about you if you're white. They are fine with anti-whiteism. They've been in power all the years. Anti-whiteism has been destroying the white race all over Western civilization. And they could have used it as a cudgel to beat the hell out of the American oligarchs, and they never have. They're fine with anti-whiteism. So anti-whiteism is not at threat of being defeated by Russia. No, this is a call to those who have been brainwashed across Finland, across the entire Western world with anti-whiteism, that you'll lose this precious equality that, of course, does nothing but inflict injury on Western kind. I'd be happy to lose that. Quote, this is not only about territories and borders. This war is also about values and ideology. So they are invoking anti-whiteism to fire the population up, to dehumanize Russians and to want to be at war with Russia. Because Finland and Sweden is also saying that it's going to join NATO. And this is disastrous. If this happens, it is disastrous. The amount of money, if you think we're poor now, if you think things are getting worse now, if the United States and therefore all of its vassals, like the UK, Germany, France, Italy, etc., if they pulled out, if they never gave support to Ukraine, far more Ukrainians would be alive today. Now, it would have been wretched for the Ukrainians to lose their country to a Russian invasion. I can absolutely sympathize. I'm a Southerner. It would absolutely be wretched for them to lose, but they're going to lose it. They're just dying in massive numbers now because America and these others continue to funnel weapons. And more importantly, this is a declaration of war. This is an act of war to give weapons, to give money, to give food, to give aid, and more importantly, intel. And that's apparently America's bragging about this, providing intel about Russian positions and things like that. This is how reckless these people are. The border is wide open on this country. Did you think they would be less reckless elsewhere? We have to absolutely pull all of these people out of office. They're going to lead America, they're going to lead the rest of the West into hell. We are already in the antechamber. This is about values and ideology. Get fired up, population. We've taught you this, that the most important thing in the world is fewer white people. We call diversity. That's the most important thing in the world. We're going to lose it. Good. Russia would view the move as a violation of international legal obligations. And do not be with me. Do not be with me. One of these absolute dunce ones and zeros thinkers. This is a nuanced situation. Don't say, well, Jason said something positive about Ukraine, therefore I hate him because I like Russia. Jason said something positive about Russia, and therefore, don't do it. This is about values and ideology. Russia would view the move as a violation of international legal obligations. The Russian foreign minister said, quote, Russia will be forced to take retaliatory steps, both of military and other nature, in order to curtail the threats that arise to its national security in this regard. The ministry said in a statement. I'm going to read that again. Quote, Russia will be forced to take retaliatory steps, both of military and other nature. Now, technically, I'll pause there. Military nature can be things like cyber attacks. It can be a lot of things. They could cut the wires that cross the Atlantic Ocean at the bottom of the sea. They could sever through all of that. There's a lot they could do that I know people are like all of a sudden talking about nuking. No one is nuking anything. No one is nuking anything. I lived at a time when there was still a siren over top my elementary school that would go off once a month. We would have to practice everybody gets to die now. And this was because we were so close to Washington, D.C. It was long after that sort of thing was happening elsewhere around the country. I imagine it was still happening in important strategic sites. But the siren would go off. It would go around, and it was gigantic. It was like the size of a Volkswagen up on top of a pole that was like 1.5 the height of a telephone pole. And it would turn full 360. And it was just this roaring sound to go for maybe 10 minutes, maybe that long, maybe between 5 and 10 minutes. Big yellow siren. And that was it's nuclear war. Well, the reason why nuclear war didn't happen then, and the reason why New York City is not going to be nuked, Washington, D.C. is not going to be nuked by the Russians, is because that means that Moscow is nuked. St. Petersburg is nuked. And they don't want that to happen. The whole bottom line about nuclear weapons is mutual destruction. Now, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be some sort of a tactical nuke or on the battlefield, or something short. There are bombs, the Moabs, there are bombs that their detonation is roughly, depending on the kiloton that they use for nuclear weapons, is like at the lower level. So it'll give you an explosion that big, but won't have the same fallout. So be prepared for that. If something like that does happen on the battlefield, one of these like Moabs or whatever it is dropped on the battlefield, and there's a video of a giant mushroom cloud, that does not mean a nuclear weapon was used. So don't allow the anti-whites and the media to tell you that the Russians just used a tactical nuke. Maybe they will. I don't know. But it would be smarter to use one of these bombs that will have an explosion just as big, but not have the radioactive fallout, because they want to be able to move in. They don't want a radioactive cloud floating around Europe, giving European populations and governments reason to be even further angry with Russia. All right, does that make sense? If it doesn't, it's because you're stupid. Kidding. But it's true for some of you. We want to defend our freedom and equality. So the rest of that quote was, in order to curtail the threats that arise to its national security in this regard. So Russia is saying that they will take steps if Finland and Sweden enter NATO. And of course, why is that happening? Because the American oligarchs are pushing this. They're not us. They don't love us. They don't like our people. If they're white, they're just as anti-white as any other anti-white. Some late developments, as many as 12 Russian missiles hit oil refinery and other infrastructure Thursday in Ukraine today, in industrial hub of Kremenchuk. The acting governor said. Let me jump on to the other. Here we have ABC News. Russia, Ukraine, live updates. Finland, Sweden, possible targets for strike if they join NATO, Russia says. Russian President Vladimir Putin's, quote, special military operation, close quote. So that's what he called it. And that's right. I remember that in the beginning. And that sounds to me like what the United States did in Vietnam. And now I had a back and forth with a member of our community, and she had misunderstood this, or I didn't make it clear that police action or special military operation doesn't mean that there aren't tanks and troops and people dying and missiles and planes and bombs. It does mean that. It just means that a far smaller percentage of the available military resources are being employed in the action. Okay, the special military operation into neighboring Ukraine began on February 24 with Russian forces invading from Belarus to the north and Russia to the east. Ukrainian troops have offered, quote, and who are they quoting? Stiff resistance. Oh, this according to U.S. officials. You know, and I salute these guys who are going out against overwhelming odds. But I also have some deep sympathy for them, because you know very well that in their ragtag vagabond scenario that they would not be going out, even holding a brand new tank busting missile from America, if they didn't also believe and were lied to that America is about to enter the war. You just have to hold out for a little bit longer. Hold out for a little bit longer, and then America's going to come in and save you. The Russian military has since launched a full-scale ground offensive in eastern Ukraine's disputed Donbass region, attempting to capture the strategic port city of Mariupol to secure a coastal corridor to the Moscow-annexed Crimean Peninsula. Senator Rand Paul single-handedly destroyed a $40 billion in aid to push a vote next week. So this is interesting. Another $40 billion single-handedly. Rand Paul sidelined the $40 billion emergency Ukraine aid bill until next week in an effort to force lawmakers to include funding for a new watchdog effort to police how the billions in taxpayer dollars are spent. Well, they don't want you to do that, Rand. They want to be able to pilfer a bunch of it, run off with it, perhaps also to destroy a bunch of it. so that they can do something about all of these damn dollars that they've printed, reducing radically the value of the money that we have, the money that we have saved. In a very rare moment, Senate Majority Leader Chucky Schumer, right from the movie, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch the Bitch McConnell joined forces, both anti-whites. Like, they're really at odds. How to stop Putin from popping a nuke. Yeah, that's some demagoguery over at the Hill. Russian sensationalism in the extreme. Russian President Vladimir Putin has threatened to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. The threat was just reiterated by Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov, despite the catastrophic risks. Despite the catastrophic risks, would he, I guess, Putin, suppose the late Russian offensive in the East fails? What are Putin's options? What are ours? If Putin used nuclear weapons, what would be his rationale? Objectives and targets? Would a demonstration shot suffice to compel a Ukrainian surrender? Or would only destruction of a major city, such as Kiev, impose enough shock and awe to force Ukraine's capitulation? I think the American oligarchs, they want as much bloodshed as possible to engender as much animus between Ukrainians and Russians. So it'd be a generational hatred. And that would, of course, would work for the American oligarchs. Now, whether you believe that Ukrainians should hate Russians or Russians should hate Ukrainians is irrespective. Doesn't undermine that point. These questions are no longer purely academic or hypothetical. Last week, when asked about Putin using nuclear weapons, CIA director and former U.S. ambassador to Russia, William Burns' answer was not to dismiss that possibility, a clear warning. What then would lead Putin to make this cataclysmic decision? Boy, what I would also be concerned about here is one of these. Now, America would never do it. That's all I'm saying. The ear is against the door. But it's not beyond shadowy forces, I'm just speculating, to maybe detonate a weapon in Ukraine and then say, look what Russia did. So that would be something that if I were in charge of Russia, I would be very worried about. So keep your eyes open for something like that happening. I think the use of a tactical nuke probably would be used if Russian oligarchs saw the potential of an invasion by NATO troops. If they saw that these steps that are really acts of war, funding, financing, feeding and watering, supplying intel, supplying state-of-the-art weapons and all of this, all acts of war. If they then saw the troops building and amassing, NATO troops, the different NATO countries building up and amassing on these borders, I could potentially see then the Russian oligarchs using a tactical nuke somewhere, not to level a city or anything like that, but somewhere to say, we're not screwing around. Somewhere probably near where those troops were massing, but still in Ukraine. So not in one of those countries. Because you're really getting to this point where many years ago we figured out, since you have mutual destruction, how can you really have a war then anymore? And really, and I spoke with people when I worked on the Hill that worked in these war games at the Pentagon. Every time they ran these games where it was like these different power blocks moving troops against each other, both armed with nuclear weapons, they just toss nukes back and forth to wipe out each other's soldiers. And so then it becomes like this, okay, well, we're just tossing nukes at the soldiers on the battlefield, and we're not going to end planet Earth. and it obviously goes nowhere. So that's like the end game. If Russia's willing to use nukes to keep NATO troops out of participating in this war, because otherwise it's a capitulation to the American oligarchs, then you could very well see a tactical nuke detonated somewhere near where NATO troops are preparing, not killing them, but somewhere near where they are preparing an invasion or potential invasion or attack, I guess, whatever you want to call it, entering Ukraine to fight Russia. Assume Putin concluded that on the current trajectory, the war in Ukraine was unwinnable and a massive military mobilization was beyond Russia's capability. Would he resort to using nuclear weapons in anger rather than a threatening demonstration? No. I mean, this goes to these sort of claims, war propaganda claims. How many times have we seen it? Oh, they're just crazy. It's always crazy. Every time you turn around, it's the other side are just crazy. And so therefore, you have to let us do what we want to do. So then all of like the normal proofs are swept off the table with those arguments. You cannot fall for those arguments. Essentially what they're saying is, would he throw a tantrum and also a nuclear weapon? I mean, come on, seriously. And would he also reason that chemical weapons would not have sufficient psychological impact and could invite outside retaliation that would not risk nuclear escalation? He would think the same thing about tossing nuclear weapons around without an invasion. So he would think the exact same thing. Well, I can't do this because I invite nukes to be launched at us. If he chooses the nuclear option, Putin must believe that it would succeed in two ways. It would force Ukraine to surrender, and it would paralyze any response, presenting NATO with a fait accompli to which it had no acceptable alternative given the escalatory and existential risk of thermonuclear war. That would render the alliance impotent provided it was not directly attacked. And Putin must assume Russia could manage the aftermath of any nuclear attacks. A nuclear strike on Kiev almost certainly would kill Ukrainian President Zelensky. That's all that matters. And any visiting dignitaries. Look, folks, do you really think he's in charge? Speculation, but if CNN says he is, then he is. Speculation was that the U.S. might send a high-level representative to Kiev, possibly President Biden. What? High-level representative to Kiev, possibly President Biden? Are they trying to set up some sort of Putin killed the president scenario? Would that tempt Putin to retaliate against someone who condemned him as a war criminal, and would Putin be limited to using only a single nuclear weapon? You have not made the case. You can't get into this, writer. Let me just take you down this primrose path that for the people who want this sort of thing. Let me just take you down this path where we skipped over reason and logic, and we're just going to jump right into some more speculation. No, thank you. 3 of NATO's 30 members nation, the US, United Kingdom, and France, possess nuclear weapons. Russia has a numerical advantage in non-strategic nuclear weapons of 5 or 6 to 1 over NATO. About 200 to 300 US Cold War vintage B-61 gravity nuclear bombs are deployed in Europe. These are called tactical, in quotes, and some argue that their use would not trigger an exchange of, quote, strategic nuclear weapons. That may not be a sound assumption. Well, it depends on where you're dropping them, of course. Let me see what you all are saying. We also have the New York Times, Ukraine live updates. Russia sees threat as Finland moves closer to joining NATO. Despise the anti-whites who control our governments. Despise the anti-white oligarchs who dominate our Western countries. Despise them to hell. There was no need for any of this. No need for any of this to take place. these oligarchs totally disconnected from reality. They're jockeying against each other for power. There was no reason for NATO to be expanding as it has been now for decades. No reason to do this. And no people who care about white well-being should be automatically siding with the anti-white oligarchs in America, in the UK, in Germany, in whatever. I mean, it's just unthinkable. It's unthinkable. They have caused this, in my opinion. I mean, I might be wrong, but in my opinion, there was no need to go pushing into territories that the oligarchs in Russia said, we need these to feel safe. We need this buffer to feel safe. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken said to attend NATO meetings, Russia warns of risk of catastrophic conflict. Former president of Russia has warned NATO that military assistance for Ukraine risks sparking a wider conflict. This is from CNBC. Dmitry Medvedev, a close ally of President Vladimir Putin, said the supply of weapons to Ukraine, quote, increase the likelihood of a direct and open conflict between NATO and Russia instead of their war by proxy. That's exactly what it is. It comes after European Commission President Ursula, look at these people. I don't even care what you have to say. It's a threat to the international order. Well, then maybe you should stop pushing eastward, right? Okay, let me see what you all are saying. Troggy is with us. Great. Machiavellius sucks. Great to see you. Nikki is here. Let me scroll to the top. And let's see if we have any questions or comments with financial gifts. None on Cash App. Those will come first, of course, if there are any. None over here on Entropy. And looks like also blank on Odyssey. Hello to everyone there on both Odyssey and D Live. Red Dog says, Jason should do seminars on this. Western Biz Makers over there, Promethean hails to you as well. All right. Remember to tag me as No White Guilt. If you write Jason, not likely to see it, although sometimes I do. Glenn is in Australia. Wonderful to see you with us today. Caleb says, ever eat any raw meat? What's your diet like? No, I don't eat raw meat. I guess I would if I had to. But diet is protein, animal protein, and animal fat. Almost no carbs, almost no simple carbs, obviously. All that stuff I just see as poison. A lot healthier eating animal protein and fat. Victorian time traveler. Some say that Panther is still out there, lurking in the dark, watching, waiting. Maybe it is. I'll keep an eye out for it. Pants is with us. Great to see you, brother. This is the Panther in Arlington. It's still sometimes spotted in neighbors' backyards. Carlisle says, my tie and shirt combination is fantastic. Very nice. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, sugar. Kingdom of Finland. The Moab isn't a nuke, correct. The U.S. has tactical nukes for their fighters, which are low yield, right? And the Moab doesn't put off, any of the radiation. It's the largest conventional weapon, right? Kingdom of Finland says he knows a good video on nukes. It's interesting. All right, Peter is here. Great to see you and welcome. Let's see. I'll just take a quick look, see if there's anything else here that might be of interest. If you have any questions about what might happen, I'll do my best to answer them. Or if you have any thoughts of your own. So we're seeing Finland and Sweden move as quickly as they can to join NATO when there is no threat to them whatsoever. Their joining NATO is for the purpose of undermining the Russian effort to maintain a buffer between it and the American oligarchs and all of their vassals elsewhere around the world. Maintain this buffer to the West. So it ultimately will undermine it by having Finland and Sweden join NATO, and it will continue the encroachment and the threat to Russia, which, even if it is, even if there is a détente in the near future, who knows? I think it's unlikely at the moment. But even if there is a détente, and maybe we end up with a scenario where there is a ceasefire, no formal end to the war because the Ukrainians still want the eastern side of Ukraine, but there is a ceasefire. That kind of thing has happened. Take a look at Korea. And so the fighting just stops. You end up having Russia holding the eastern side of Ukraine as a buffer, and of course the Black Sea, so they control the Black Sea. And then you have Finland, this 834-mile, whatever it is, border with Russia that forces the Russian oligarchs to ramp up means of warfare, to go into another Cold War with the United States and the rest of the world. The proliferation of nuclear weapons. This can all be laid at the feet of the anti-white oligarchs of the United States and elsewhere, because there was no reason. I mean, you might immediately jump to it's just the military industrial complex doing this sort of thing. They want to make money. They want to, well, you rev up the population who already hate Western kind with anti-whiteism and that morality, and you rev them up and you say, and you can just look back in the history books and see what it was like for people to be threatened. And there were actually Soviet communist spies and all this kind of. You can look into it for yourself, of course, and check with CNN to make sure it's true. But there were these kinds of, and there were witch hunts, and some people were therefore a witch hunt. There were innocent folks. There were a lot of legitimate spies that people fingered, and they were arrested. Oddly enough, go free again and again. Not our practice, but they get out of prison. You get to flee back to a little nation somewhere. That happened a time or two. But that is not the environment where you want what we already have, because then they come and they say, well, you're also a traitor to the country. You are somehow working with the Russians. And you already see this sort of thing, obviously. They use on Trump and etc. But it'll be you're working with the Russians, and movies will be turned out, TV shows that will dehumanize and will turn every Russian person into this blood-drinking monster. And then if you step out of line, then you're also not only, if you're white, not only going to suffer the consequences of the anti-whites coming down on you for that, but you're also going to suffer the consequences of them using Patriot Act and these other sort of things to say, you are this infidel, you are favoring Russia, you are in cahoots with them, you're undermining the American experiment, and all of our equality and democracy and diversity. And so therefore, as a traitor, you're going to be executed. That's not the world that I want to live in. I imagine you all don't either. Maverick says, that's correct about the Moab, Jason. Okay, cool. So we're on point there. All right. It's been real, folks. Roll out.